When you go on the Spinner Clean website, you can buy the motors. You'll see that it says you're able to fit them yourselves. So I got in touch with Spinner Clean. They emailed me the instructions, and this is basically what I'm going to go through, make a video of it. It's something I've managed to do myself, so if I can do it, you can. Kit you'll need then is screwdrivers. I'm going to use Phillips screwdrivers, and you'll need a flathead one, which will come apparent later. Some tape, masking tape, or in this case I'm using electrical tape, and a Sharpie to write on them so I can label the wires and where they go for reassembly. If you've got a mobile phone, it's worth having because you can always take pictures of it at each stage as well, so you can remind yourself later on. Also torch, that will come in handy as well for some of the nooks and crannies. Okay, on the instructions, first thing it will tell you to take off is this blue handle here. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screws that you're going to have to take off, and that will expose the power cord underneath. There'll be 6 screws in total, 2 small ones, and then you've got 4 larger ones. You've got 2 which will be at the front here that I'm pointing out, and then these 4 are the ones at the back. Just take a note of where they go for afterwards. So now all the screws have been removed, I'm now going to lift up the handle and then remove it. You can't completely remove the handle because there's a small hole here which the cable's going to run through. So the next bit is basically undo 2 screws on here, which will then tell you to get the brown live wire out and the blue neutral wire, and then you can remove the whole power cable. Just using your Phillips screwdriver, just locate the screw, loosen it, and then as you can see you can completely remove the live wire and do the same for the neutral one. And on the brown plastic it is marked live and neutral for you as well. Once you've removed that, you've got this white bit of plastic here with 2 screws. You're going to have to loosen those. That just basically holds the power cable in place, very similar to what you get on your normal plugs at home. And then once you've loosened that off, you'll be able to completely remove the power cable, he says. There we go. Had to completely undo that screw then. So what I'll do is just put that back in for now. That's the first stage done. Now the actual head of the Skyvac unit is made in layers. So this is the top layer. There's a blue layer that you'll have to take out, and then there's some layers underneath as well. Each one is screwed down. So we're going to move the very top one here, and you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screws in total. You'll notice the top here is like steps, so these will be the smallest screws. Then you've got the next size up, be a bit taller, and then the ones at the back here will be the tallest screws. So take them out, Phillips screwdriver, and then put them to one side and just try and remember what screws went where. So basically just think steps going up, smallest, middle size, tallest ones. Now all 6 screws have been undone, I can lift up the top layer. I'm going to use my finger to remove the 2 smallest screws here at the front, because the screwdriver hasn't been able to take them out. Here's one. There's the other one. Then again, just to show you the 6 screws, here's 3 of them. Tallest one goes at the back. This is the middle sized one, which obviously goes in the middle, and then you've got the smallest one, which goes right at the very front. Just remember those for when you put it all back together. Stage 2 complete. When you lift up this grey lid, you'll find here there's a load of wires which connect to the switches to turn the machine on and off at the front. You're going to have to disconnect them. Once you've disconnected it, you can completely remove this grey lid, which then brings us down to the next level, which will be the blue part. So first of all, what we'll do is we're going to concentrate on how to remove the switches and the cables. Okay, these are the cables which go to your switches. on the switch, you've got these grey cables here, and they run from the switch to the actual motors themselves. So these are the ones that we need to take off from the actual switch itself. The other top level, which you can see, so in total there's 4 spade ends going into this switch. It's only the bottom 2 that belong to these grey wires which connect to the motors that we are actually interested in disconnecting. But before you disconnect these, what it's good to do is mark them up with tape, and then write on the tape so you know what motor goes back to what switch. It's up to you how you number it, 1, 2 or 3, or for me, I just imagine I'm stood at the front. So this one here would be my left motor, I call that the centre one, and this one here will be the right hand motor. Obviously you can do whatever you do, that's just the way I've done it. Just imagine me standing at the front. So what we'll do first is we'll disconnect these ones. You need a screwdriver, not a Phillips one, a flat end one. I don't know if you can see, I'll try and zoom in for you. But basically on these spade ends, on the top where the screwdriver is pointing, I can't get a good shot at the moment for you. You'll see there's a tab, and you need to press in with the tab with the flathead screwdriver. Basically just a little tab on the top of what it connects onto, press that in and then pull, and then you'll actually remove the wires. What I'm showing you here is you've got a black plastic off and a white plastic off. The black plastic off has got the 2 grey wires which lead to your motor held together, and then the white plastic off, what that's doing is holding in further 2 wires, the white one and the orange one. Both of those wires go to the top of the switch. So what I'm going to do is carefully, using a pair of scissors, cut off and remove the white plastic off, but I'll keep the black plastic off that's on the grey wires on there. This is so I can separate the grey part of the lid once all the wires are disconnected from the motors to the switch. Now it's worth tracing back the wires from your switch to the motors to know which switch is going to what motor. So that's pretty much what I've done here, and then obviously you're going to label them all up. So I'm going to label the top of the grey motors where they come off from the switch, so putting them back together is easier. And also what I'm now going to do is remove these grey foams from above the motors. So after working out what motors go to what switches, I've labelled up the relevant grey wires, and obviously you can mark up how you want, switch 1, 2 or 3, but I've used switch left, centre and right, and I've traced them back so I know what motor goes to what. So basically when I do the reverse, I pin it all back together and connected it back to the switches. On one of the switches you'll see you've got a brown wire. This is your earthing wire. It's got to be threaded through all the other parts of the head when you take them off the gutter vac. So we've got to disconnect it, but it's got a second spade end on here which will have another wire fitted on there as well. This is what you're going to have to remove off that particular spade end of the earth wire using your flathead screwdriver. Just pressing in on the tab, remove it. You have to do this because otherwise you can't separate everything, and that brown earthen wire has got to be fed back through layer by layer as we strip down the gutter vac further. We're almost there now to completely remove this layer here, but there's still some more cables we've got to undo. You'll see you've got these white cables and red cables which go from each of the 3 switches, and what they'll do is they'll join up basically together into another like double-ended spade end, which is inside these bits I'm now touching here, the white plastic. The bits at the top will go straight to the layer we're taking off. It's the bits underneath, they're the ones that we need to remove. So then we can completely remove this particular layer off the top of the gutter vac. To do this, you're going to need your flat-ended screwdriver again, and you're going to go, like I said, in the bottom, You're going to have to look, because on one side you can see the tab, the opposite side you can't. Work out where the tab is. It's obviously not as easy as what we've done before. Passing the screwdriver like you see me up underneath. Just press that tab and then you'll be able to remove the wires. So that's the red wire gone. We're now going to go onto this white wire. Again, going from the bottom, doing exactly the same as I did before. But when this one comes off, what you'll notice is it's slightly different, because basically we've got one spade end but two wires going to it. And what we can do is trace back the other white wire, and you'll see that this will lead all the way up into one of the switches. So all we've got to do basically is just disconnect that from the spade end, and then we're all good to go. Now we can completely move this part of the head of the unit, and then what we've got left is this blue layer underneath, and then we're going to move on to that stage of basically how to strip this down. What it's worth doing though is having a look at this blue layer, is take note of the power mix lever, and you'll see above it you've got that sticker where it says power mix. Just make sure you've got everything in your head, or take a picture of it or whatever, so that when we go to do the reverse of putting it back together, we know we've got the blue part seated on correctly. Now the blue part has got about 9 screws holding it all on. So I'm just trying to show you here that there's 9 screws going all the way around. They're all the same size. And then basically using your Phillips screwdriver, you need to undo them, take them off, put them down to one place, and then we can pass all the wires through and completely remove the blue part. Okay, so what I'm now doing is with the Phillips screwdriver, I'm just undoing those 9 screws. Hopefully I've mentioned around the blue part of the head unit. They're all the same size, so once you've done it, just take them off, put them to one side, and then obviously you can place this blue part of the head unit with it as well, so it just makes your life easier when you put it all back together. Let's say label things up. Okay, one more to go. So as well, I realised earlier when I was doing this, somehow I've turned the audio off. So hopefully the voiceover I've done will make up for it. Okay, now we've got to here, what I should be able to do now is remove this blue part and just lift it up. And all I've got to do is feed these wires. So I've got a brown earth wire, the white and red wire that we've undone. I'm just going to feed those through this hole here. Because they'll probably catch if I just lift up the blue bit on its own. And because I've got these grey cables which come from the switches, and I've marked them up to what motor they're going to go to, I'm going to do the same here, and I'm going to feed them through these holes here. Let's do the same for each one, and these holes sit right on top of the actual motors. Take it to help them breathe and all that lot. So I ain't an electrician. Just done that, I can completely now remove this off. Just take a note of these areas here, because they sit onto something which I'll show later on for you. This is what's underneath the blue part. You've got this foam, you've got these plastic sheaths as well which go from the motor, and I guess they're protecting the rubber foam from all the heat and so on, and the wires feeding through those, the grey ones anyway. Get me stuff out of the light, which then sit down onto the motors, which we'll get to in a minute. Now the white cable, the red cable, and also the live wire, they feed in, but they're the outside of the sheath, not inside. So just remember that, take some pictures or whatever you need to. So remember, they don't feed inside where the wires going directly to the motor do. They go outside of it. So what you can do now is you can remove these plastic sheaths, the center motor, as I call it, the one with the white switch, that seems to be raised higher than these two motors here, so that's how I know it's also the center one, apart from the fact I've labelled it up as well, C for center, so I know that. So I'm going to take off these plastic sheaths, feed the cable through, sorry, doing it one-handed, so it's completely removed. Same with the other one. These here are exactly the same size, so it doesn't matter what way round they go. And then on the white switch, or the center motor as I've called it, you've just got this. And then going back to this blue bit, the reason why I wanted to get you to make a note where these foam bits are, because obviously when you sit this all back together, you can see the indents, that's where the top of the sheaths that we've just removed sit. We can now remove this foam, but I'm going to take this black plastic bit off here. They just sit on top of your motors. Each motor's got one. In fact, I'll leave it in place, but you could move it. I'm just going to, sorry, it's all one-handed. Get the foam over it first. And you can see now we can completely lift it up. It's better, I put the camera on the tripod, I've got two hands, so I can feed the wires through. The three holes which go to the motors. I can now remove that. Then as it exposes all this, now to actually change these motors, you're going to have to remove this grey layer here as well. Again, we have 9 screws going all the way around, and then you have a 10th one here, which is what that brown cable goes to, which is your earthing cable. These 9 ones go into holes that are recessed. When this one comes out, it's not a recessed hole. So I'm going to go around undoing all these, but what I can do for this bit, which belongs to the center motor, I can remove this plastic bit and I can take that off. Sorry, try and do it all one-handed. And that'll expose the grey cables here, which go from the switch to the actual motor itself. So this sits on the very top and covers the motors. These have been cable tied. I could have cut them, but I haven't. What I've done is completely remove the spade ends from where they sit on top of the motor, which I'll point out in a minute. Because basically, once this grey cover's undone, I then lift that off, you can then remove your motors. And with this cover sat on top of the motor, this grey bit here won't lift up over, so I'm having to remove that. So in order to do so, I'm completely removing the wires. Remember, we've labelled them up, so I know that's for the centre. And what I could do is you could put some tape and mark up the motors, or somehow with tape just mark it on this grey bit here, so when it all goes back together. But this motor are good. It's my left motor, as I'm calling it. That's the one I want to change, so I'm not too bothered. I know what I'm doing here, but if you was going to move all these out, I'd probably label them up as well. So again, I've just took this sheath off, but because of the cable ties, it's stuck on, so I'm using my screwdriver. Get to the spade ends, pressing that tab in to unlock it so that I can remove, if I'm doing it in the right place, the actual cables. And again, these are labelled up and I know that's the right motor, that's the centre motor. I'm going to do exactly the same with this left motor. This is the one I'm actually changing today. This one isn't as easy. Oh, it's going to take off, but it's coming off. If it wasn't, I'd have left this plastic bit on and just waited until I actually took this grey bit off. So what I'm going to have to do is, again, undo the wires from the motor using a screwdriver and pressing in on that tab that we keep talking about. There we go. Put that to one side. So I'm now going to undo the 9 main screws that are going to hold this grey part of the head unit together. These particular 9 screws, all the same size as each other, so I'm going to take them off, place them together to one side so I know what they're for when I come back to them. It's probably best to do it in the weekend when you've got plenty of time, but I need my gutter vac tomorrow on the job. When you order stuff from Spinner Clean, what I like is the fact they only take a couple of days and it's there at your house. So I've got the part, I just want to change it, and I've got all 3 motors working then for my next job. Right, that's the 9 screws done on the outside. Let's put them to one side. Now I'm going to undo this screw here, which is what the earth cable runs to. I need to undo that because obviously we need to remove this grey bit underneath. But what I will show you is when I take it out, this particular screw is different to the 9 that we placed, just removed. So I don't know if you can see, but totally different. The 9 on the outside, that's slightly longer and has got a point on the bottom. The earth screw, it's only a little bit shorter, but it does look different in colour, and it's a flat end on the bottom. Plus you've got your earth wire connected to it anyway. So take them off, put them all to one side. Okay, next thing I want to point out is you've got 1, 2, 3 separate screws here which are holding down this grey bit we have to undo, and then 1 in the centre. I guess you show it better. So you've got 3, 2, 1 screw here. And then just next to these wires here, which you can, by the way, pull and just remove to make it easier to get your screwdriver in. The centre one, that screw, is longer than the other 3 round here. So when you take them out, just remember the longer one basically goes in the middle. Okay, centre one is coming out, so I don't have to move that red wire, but if need be you can do. So I can't get some good lighting on there. Alright, so the main thing I want to do is basically take out the centre screw and compare it for you to the other 3 screws that we just took out. So you've got 3 screws, and then the centre screw here is just a tad longer than the other 3. So when you put it down, just remember the longest one out of that group of 4 goes in the centre. Once you've undone all them screws, you'll be able to now lift up this part and remove that to expose the bit underneath. Like I said, I know that's my right hand, or what I'm calling the right hand motor, centre motor. This is the left motor, and this is the one that's blown. That is the one I'm going to change. And the other day I changed these 2, so I'm going to change this one. I can't at this stage lift these motors out. There's another layer that we're going to have to lift up. So there's nothing to undo this time. I'll just remove my light and then I'll take it out of the way for you. So all I'm going to do is grab hold of it, lift up to remove it. On this particular level tray, that's what sits the centre motor. It's higher than the other 2. So this is the one with the white switch. So I'm calling it the centre motor. I don't need to change that. I'm going to take that off, place it to one side. Just please note you've got these rubber seals. Just make sure if you're going to take them off, clean them up or whatever, put them back on there because you'll need to when you put the whole thing back together. So I'll just take that off, move it to one side. So with that out of the way, this is the bottom layer that we're going to go to, and then you've got 2 motors inside this level. I know that one goes to the what I call the right hand switch, as I'd be facing it when I turn the machine off. And the left hand switch is the one that isn't working, so it's this motor that I've got to change. Now your old motors, they come with a rubber seal on top. So I've got one here that I'm touching with my finger. Your new ones don't come with these, so you're going to have to take that off your old motor. I could take the whole motor out and do it now, but I'm just trying to show you. So basically I need to keep hold of that. You'll see there's these 4 quadrants there, and they basically sit on these bits there when you put it back together. So keep hold of that. They don't come with the new one. And then also you'll have another bit fitted here around the bottom. Take that off, keep hold of it. Like I said, it doesn't come with the new motor. So that's the old knackered one. And all I'm going to do now is fit the new one in, then do the reverse. And hopefully when I turn it on, everything all works. Now this here is the brand new motor. That's how it will come. So you've got to keep those old seals and then basically place them back on. So I'm going to put the top seal back on there now. Just stretch it over these golden bits, and you'll see you just got to line up the recesses with these bits that stick out, and then basically they'll press down. And then I guess these are just on there to make sure, excuse me, it's all one-handed, that it won't basically spin round, keeps it all in place. Just making sure that's all fitted. Underneath where all these motors go, you've got these valves as well, so if they come off, it's important you make sure they're set back there in the middle as well. So that's the new motor on, and all we're going to do now is do the reverse, put it all back together and wire it all up. Incidentally, on the motors, if I can get my light to stay still, there's screwdrivers touching now. That's where your spade end goes on when you reattach the wires. You've got one this side and then one on the opposite corner. You'll see them, there's only two, one on each side, and that's basically where you're going to reattach the spade ends for the wiring, those grey wires that go back to your switch. When we put this level back together, just point to note, under where what I call the centre motor, the one with the white switch, where that sits, underneath it basically is your power max lever. So just make sure that this rubber ring is sat where it should be, otherwise you're going to get problems. And then you'll also notice there's your power mix lever, and it moves this, and then you'll see it, I don't know if you can see with the light, opens and closes those holes. So it's worth checking to make sure all that works. Now if you ever have to change the centre motor, there is a difference. You've got two of these foam rubber rings that sit between the two rubber seals. Don't throw them away, make sure you put them back where they are. Okay, when I was showing you the power max lever, these rubber seals come off, so basically I'm just making sure they're back now where they should go. And that's that bit done. At this point, it's still worth, when you put it back together, make sure your power max lever is working, and then you do that throughout, tightening up the screws back on there as we go through each part, putting it back together. So I'm going to put this grey part back where you've got the red and white switch, and when I put it on to the actual head of the gutter vac, there is a way to know what way round it goes, apart from if you've labelled it up. The way I remembered it is I've got these bits of raised plastic here, and I remembered the position they're in. But also, if you remember, you've got 9 holes going all the way around, and then we've got a 10th one, which is your earth screw. And the earth screw lines up with those raised bit of plastic here that I was talking about. If I take this off a sec, you also see you've got the 9 screws that go round, they're all evenly spaced. But obviously between these two there's another hole there, and that's the one where your earth screw goes back in. So when you replace this grey bit back on, just to line up the earth screw, and you know it also lines up with those raised bits of plastic there, then you're in the right ballpark. So here's the brown cable with the earth screw on it that we mentioned. I'm putting it into the hole that lines up with these raised bits of plastic, so now it's the right way round. And if it all fits in, and I can turn it so it starts to get into an area it's going to bite, then we know hopefully everything's lined up and we're to a good start. Going back to the 4 screws that we take off in the centre of this particular part, remember we want the longest one that goes in the middle, so I've identified that. I'm going to put that in the middle hole, and then the other 3 are for the other screws. So longest one back in the centre, and the other 3 in the other holes, and away we go. Start with the centre one first. Okay, and you put these screws up, just get them so not too tight, because we can also do the last final turns to make sure they're hand tight at the end. And there's a reason for that. It's just basically make sure it all goes on evenly. And then while you're doing this process, remember, keep checking your power mix lever to make sure it's operating freely. So I'm happy with that. Now I'm going to give these the final turns to make them hand tight, not over tighten. Right, I've got a problem with the power max lever, so obviously something's not working right. It's best to find this out now, because otherwise if you put the whole thing together, you're going to have to take the whole thing apart again to rectify it. So it's easier to do at this stage. Right, now it's working, so obviously what I've done is something up too tight. So that's the F screw back on, the middle 4 screws back in. Now doing these outer 9 screws. So again, I'm just going to do them all loosely, and then I'll go around tightening them up. And all the while checking the power mix lever to make sure it operates freely in the way it should be doing. Okay, that's all 9 in. So now it's given all a final tight, just hand tight. And then again, final check of the power max lever. All seems good. Now on to the next stage. Okay, the next stage is now reattaching the grey cables, which go from the motor to the actual switch itself, and then putting these plastic sheaths back in. Like I said, I pointed out earlier where the connections go with the spade ends. All you've got to do is push them on. Quite straightforward this stage. And then make sure they lock in place. And then just make sure this sits back on top of the motors and push down. That's one. All we've got to do now is the other ones. And of course, if you pre-labelled them up, or I can remember actually what ones these go on, and I'm just going to reattach everything back. That's where labelling up your wires comes in handy. Definitely handy to have a torch for this. Okay, we're now going to place the foam back on. So to do this, I just need to get all the wires, pass them from the motors through the holes in the foam. And once done that, I'm going to go through the earthing wire and the red and the white wire, which we've got to connect back up. Right, so then we're going to replace these sheaths. And again, I'm going to pass the grey wire from the motors through there, and then sit this plastic sheath so it fits on top of the motor. Do the same with this one, except for this one, the 3 wires, the brown earth wire, the red and the white wire, they're not going to pass inside the plastic sheath, only the grey wires from the motor. And on top of this one, the centre motor, again as I call it, the one that goes to the white switch, instead of those black sheaths, because it's higher up than the others, it'll have this small white cap one. I'm just going to fit that in and then place that on top like so. So there's the higher one, the centre motor with the plastic, and then this one is the right hand motor, as I call it, the plastic sheath, and you'll see inside you've got the grey motors. Same with this one, this big left hand motor, but you'll then notice I've got the red, brown and the white wire coming up through the foam, but on the outside, not the inside of the plastic sheath. Okay, next put back on there then is going to be the blue plastic part. It does sit in a certain way. Remember, just where my fingers are, we've got the two small screws, and just about here where my hand will be where the switches are facing, and then line up behind them you'll see you've got screws here for the middle ones, sorry, here, and then at the back here, so that's the way it needs to be facing. There's also a sticker that I took note of its position before I took it off, so I know exactly what way around this one needs to sit. And then we've got this hole here where my finger's poking through. That's where I need to get the white wire to come through, like so. Also the red wire and the brown earth wire. So I'm just going to thread them through. Now on top of each motor, remember you've got these little small holes, and that's what we need to get the relevant grey wires from each motor to poke through, so it's ready to reconnect all back up. So that's what I'm now going to do. Hope you can see better now. I've got the grey wires coming out on the top part of each motor, so it's all ready to wire back up, and then the red, white and the brown earthen wire through this hole here. And also, before we stick it up, remember the tip I said before, is make sure that this power mix sticker is above the actual power mixer itself, which is how it was. So I now know definitely 100% everything is lined up perfect, ready to go to the next stage. On these 9 holes that we've got, I'm going to replace back these 9 screws, so I'm just going to place them in, and once they're in place, tighten them all up. And then that'll be the blue housing connected back onto the gutter vac. There we go, all 9 screws. Now it's all 9 in, I'm just going to tighten them all hand tight. Now it's all 9 screws, all put back in, all the wiring's back in place. It's all ready to then reconnect back to the very top part that goes on top of the actual head of the unit itself. Okay, what I'm going to do is hold this bit here, the grey end. I'm going to support that and then reattach the red cable by pushing the spade end onto its connection inside this. Make sure it's locked in place. So that's all connected up now. I've done the red one first just because the cable's shorter. Now we're going to do the same with this white one. So that's now the red and the white connected together. Now I've got the earth wire to reconnect as well. Now going to reconnect the orange wire that we took off where it threads here onto the brown earth wire. It's a double like spade end connection point on the end. Get that to lock in place, and then what I'll do is I'll put this bit back onto its place on the top right of the actual left hand switch, so to speak. So here's the left hand switch. Where my finger is now, that's where the grey switches are going to go to. Above it there's two more blades. This one here on this side, the top right or bottom left as we're looking at it now. In fact, that's where it's going to connect. However, before they do that, I'm going to connect the centre grey motor wire onto the centre switch. And on the top you've got the yellow and the you've got on the top you've got the white and the orange wires going there, which is why we left them in place. So it's the spade end connectors on the bottom of the switch. Doesn't matter if you get the grey ones the wrong way round, as long as they're on the both on the bottom switch. So that's the centre one done. And then going to do the same for the ones on the right hand side. Now I'm going to do the same again for the right hand, sorry, it'd be the left hand switch as I'm calling it. Just trying to make sure the wires don't get tied up in knots. Right, the light is not the best, sorry I can't get it to see. It's actually, the video's taking that long, my light's dying out. But the white cable, where it's got like a double fitting on the spade end, I've connected that to the top of the switch on the left, and I've done the same with the orange switch. Orange wire on the right hand, top right hand spade end of the switch, where it's a double one, so it's also got the brown earth wire attached to it. So that's it now, all wired back up. Just got a plastic off it, tidy it all up and move on to the next stage. That's it, all wired up on the switches correctly. Everything now cable tidied, set up as it was before, the zip ties. Now we've just got to secure this bit down, put the handle and the power back in. Okay, I nearly forgot, I've got to put these foam circular bits back like these two are on top of the motors. Saw them down on the floor, so that reminded me, and then get this all back on and try and keep these wires off the top of these motors. Just put the top back on, longer screws at the back, obviously the medium sized ones out of the three, if you remember from what we all took off, in the middle, and then the shortest ones at the front. Don't know if you can see, but you just line up, you can just about see there's a blue bit of plastic under there. You probably might not be able to see it, I'm not sure. And that's how I basically make sure it's all lined up. Place a screw in, put the final one in, that's the top back on. Then we're ready to wire up the plug and then place back the blue handle. Okay, what we've got to do now is wire this up. So we've got the live going to what's marked L for live and then N for neutral. Now that's going to be holding. We can put this back in place. Make sure everything's lined up. Tighten this and it will keep the cable in place. Just slide this back up the power cable. Make sure it's all in position. Just remind you again, 4 long screws out of the 6 that we took off from the blue handle. They go to the rear, and then the 2 shorter ones you're left with go on the front holes. All we've got to do is tighten these up, and that'll be it, all back together. And then the big test, turn it all on, check each motor individually, and everything should be working fine, it says. Top tip, do up the front 2 screws first. I did these 4 here, but these front 2 here didn't line up with the holes properly, so I had to undo everything, push this forward enough so it lined up properly, started with the front, worked my way back, and went on a bit better. Right, that's it, all back together, it's all working. So that's how you change your motors in your Skyvac. Make sure you've got yourselves these filters and you put them on the Skyvac all the time. It's there to protect your motors from going. And you're supposed to replace these off their website every 4 months. I've probably pushed it with mine. That's probably why they've gone in the first place. So as you can see, I've got 2 new ones as well because I don't want to pay all that money out again. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope it helps.